bridge that protects us from the water is in the water.
Details are coming from the voice and data recorders that were on that ship.
Crews are working around the clock after the deadly bridge disaster.
Many people could be legally responsible for the terrible fall of the Baltimore Bridge, which has made the legal system very complicated. Baltimore City has sued the owners and managers of the Dali, the cargo ship that hit the bridge, saying they were careless by letting the ship sail when it knew it had power problems. 6 construction workers died in the accident, which added another level of criminal probe to the mix. When the FBI and the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, work together, it adds a new layer to the investigation. This is because the deaths require a separate criminal investigation, while the NTSB focuses on finding out what caused the accident. This makes things more difficult because crew members can now protect themselves from self-incrimination, which could stop the flow of important information that is needed for both probes. The investigation is taking a whole new turn, and we will explain that in bits and pieces in today's video. But make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more updates. Chapter 1. The Lawsuit. Baltimore City has started legal action against the Dali's owners and managers. The Dali was the cargo ship that caused the Francis Scott Key Bridge to fall on March 26, killing 6 construction workers. The claim says that the Dali's owners were careless when they let the ship leave the port of Baltimore, even though there were known power problems that hadn't been fixed. When the ship left port around 12:45 a.m. and hit the Key Bridge around 1:30 a.m., the accident happened. 8 building workers were working on fixing holes in the bridge at the time of the accident. They fell into the Patapsco River during the crash, and 2 workers were rescued. 4 bodies were later found, but the other 2 workers are still lost and are thought to be dead. Baltimore City is taking legal action in the U.S. District Court of Maryland. They want a jury hearing and want the owners to be held fully responsible for the Key Bridge collapse. The claim says that at the time of the ship's collision with the bridge, there were no bad weather conditions, problems with visibility, or other signs that something bad was about to happen. The legal papers also say that alarms that showed the Dali's power supply was unstable were set off before it left the port. Even though these warnings were given and it was clear that the ship wasn't seaworthy, it continued its trip. The city's lawsuit also says that the crew wasn't doing their job properly and wasn't skilled enough. It says that they didn't keep or use some important pieces of equipment properly, like the ship's engine and propulsion system. But the FBI has entered the scene, and this might shake things a bit. Chapter 2. FBI enters the scene. The FBI has initiated a criminal investigation into the Baltimore Bridge collapse. Some have expressed concern about the FBI conducting its inquiry alongside the NTSB's investigation. The NTSB's primary focus is to determine the cause of the incident, leveraging agreements with relevant parties, including the nation of Singapore, where the vessel is registered. These agreements ensure cooperation and evidence sharing from the crew. However, the FBI's involvement introduces a criminal dimension, particularly concerning the deaths of the 6 workers on the bridge. This shifts the dynamic, as employees aboard the vessel now have rights protecting them from self-incrimination, even though they are within U.S. waters. This situation may hinder the flow of information crucial to the investigation, though such cooperation is not always straightforward in such cases. The NTSB remains the lead agency in the investigation. If the NTSB finds evidence of illegal activity, they should send the case to the Department of Justice so that a separate criminal investigation can be started. Trying to do these studies at the same time might be hard. Aviation investigations may follow different rules, but maritime investigations are more complicated, especially when working with crew members on a Singapore-flagged ship, many of whom are Indian. During a recent event on marine social media, the Deputy Secretary General of the Singapore Registry talked about scary things that happened to him with the FBI. When the FBI got on the ship, they allegedly searched rooms without properly gathering the crew or reporting what they saw. They even went into rooms where crew members were sleeping. In addition, all of the team members' cell phones were taken away. For ship crew members, Cell phones are an important way to stay in touch with their families and friends back home. When these phones were taken away, they could no longer talk to each other. Now, the crew finds themselves completely cut off from communication with their families. While the FBI may have conducted necessary procedures with their phones, returning them promptly would alleviate this isolation. Additionally, the crew faces restrictions on leaving the ship for shore leave due to their visa terms. Despite the trauma they've experienced, they are confined to the vessel. While the investigation into the incident is ongoing and culpability is undetermined, certain crew members are undoubtedly innocent. Yet they remain confined on board without the opportunity to step ashore, even briefly, which warrants consideration. Another pressing issue is the crew's eventual repatriation and the need for crew changes. While crew members directly involved in the incident may need to remain on board, others with lesser roles should be assessed for their necessity to stay. This raises questions about the treatment of these crew members and underscores the importance of fair and humane practices in such situations. Once again, it's essential to acknowledge the significant trauma endured by the crew, although incomparable to the immeasurable loss suffered by the victims' families. In those critical 4 minutes, the crew experienced the most harrowing moments of their lives. While the incident may ultimately prove to be an accident with no crew responsibility or the result of mechanical or human error, the NTSB must uncover the truth. However, regardless of the investigation's outcome, the ship is slated to depart by next month, likely for repairs before it can resume sailing. Unless the Port of Baltimore and the state of Maryland intervene with legal action to prevent its departure, the ship will leave, necessitating considerations for the crew's well-being. Providing them with their cell phones to reconnect with their families, at the very least, would be a fair measure. Presently, the ships entering Baltimore aren't as sizable as the Dali, which means larger vessels, such as 2 coal carriers, remain stuck in port. However, the smaller strategic sealift vessels can now navigate the harbor, as they have drafts less than 35 ft, facilitating potential emergency operations. Nonetheless, the port's channel remains closed as efforts continue for the ship's removal. But the question comes again: who will pay for the bridge collapse? Chapter 3. Who will pay? The collapse of the Baltimore Bridge has led to a complicated legal fight with many parties possibly responsible for the tragedy. The ship's owner and director are important players, and what they did before the power went out will be carefully looked into. This close examination will find out if problems with the equipment, the lack of backup generators, or carelessness on the part of the team were factors. The Limitation of Liability Act might protect the ship owner in some ways, but there could be exceptions if the owner knew about problems ahead of time. Maryland's government could also be held responsible if it turned out that the bridge didn't follow safety rules or had been neglected for too long. It is very hard to prove in court that the bridge should have been able to handle the impact. In the same way, engineering and construction companies can be held responsible for mistakes in their work or poor upkeep. However, the people who built the bridge may not be responsible if it met industry standards when it was built. The legal situation will be complicated, and there will probably be many lawsuits. These could be for wrongful death, carelessness, breach of contract, or contribution. The National Transportation Safety Board and maritime officials will look into what happened to find out what caused the crash. It's hard for plaintiffs to show that the standard of care was broken, even though the Limitation Act might limit the ship owner's financial responsibility. It might not cover claims of wrongful killing. There will be a lot of action in court involving insurance companies, especially Britannia. There will be big financial effects, like fixing the bridge, cleaning up, fixing damaged cars, paying victims' families, and losing money on business. The U.S. government might pay to fix the bridge, and lawsuits will decide who is responsible for other losses. The age of the bridge and any possible design flaws will be very important to legal studies. It's possible that older bridges weren't built to handle the weight of big container ships today. Overall, the fall of the Baltimore Bridge will lead to complicated legal problems involving many people. For the ship owner, the Limitation Act might protect them in some ways, but the state and engineering companies could also be held responsible. The upcoming court case will decide who has to pay for the costs of this terrible event. So what are your thoughts? Do let me know in the comments. Like the video and subscribe to the channel for more updates. We will catch you in the next one.